I know he wants us to.
He thinks, like saying, already this. Yeah, I don't understand. I need to make sure that we have the width. I got you all this.
He's got one road he wants to prioritize.
All right, I'll call this meeting to order. All right, do I have a roll call and determination of quorum?
Hope so.
Matthew Lehane.
Here.
Paul Yellow.
Here.
Jamie Jackson. Sam Levine.
Here.
Adam Derrick.
Here.
Melody Fowler.
Here.
Amy Garbarini. Kate Gibson.
Morning, Amy.
Stephen Haynes.
Here remotely.
Christine Hefner. Leon Hughes. Daniel Cohen. Nick Miner. Stephen Miner. Nick Ruiz.
Here.
Bob Schneider. Michelle Shropshire. Rodney White.
Here.
Kapel Akbari. Lee Anderson. Mohammed Benamar. Chelsea Beitas. Kimberly Cook. Mike Craig. Ryan Council. Shannon Fennell. Todd Horsley. Cassie Lord.
Here.
Jacob Paswick. Greg Paddington. Greg Reed. Joe Stainsby. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Well,
A question, Mr. Chair. Just our sympathies with Stephen Haynes. He's on the call right now, but he's down with COVID, so that's why he's not here. Also with Michelle Shropshire seconded to a different position, do we need to update the TAC representation from BDOT or?
We talked to Becky about that last time, that
Okay.
Coffee's gonna be stepping in.
Okay, go ahead and make that change
But,
formally.
no, I think you need to send us an
Okay,
email or a note or something.
Okay.
We have to save those notes to prove that we didn't just, randomly pick someone that we got asked to change. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
all right, we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the October 2nd, 2023 Technical Advisory Committee TAC agenda. This is an action item.
So I would like to pull this 6B, on resolution 2410 and put that under 7B.
Why?
I would like to just discuss it,
Okay. You want it under 7B?
yeah, because it's RTA related.
Okay, that's fine. All right, do I have a motion for approval of the October 2nd, 2023 TAC agenda with the removal of item 6B from the consent agenda, moving it to item 7B under the action/discussion items?
Motion to approve.
Second, all right. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, pass it. All right, we'll move on to the review of the September 18th, 2023 Policy Committee meeting. And I think this is just a quick review, if there's any notable items, or if anybody at TAC has any questions, rather than a full review of the agenda.
Yeah, so I'm not going to cover things that are already in this agenda because we're going to do now anyway. So there are a bunch of TAC amendments which are all approved. TIP amendments which are all approved, as you know. Scroll down, please, corner. Those are all TIP again. Scroll down. So we did an update on the CMAC STGB process, and the selection process was approved as agreed to at the last TAC. We realized at the last minute that there is a difference between the CMAC and STGB screening in process, so we put that on today's agenda just to get some clarification, but it was adopted as written. Again, TIP amendments. We amended the SEEP as you all saw and recommended at the last TAC, so you know all about that. There's nothing new there. Appeal funding formula scenarios, you know all about that. You looked at it last time. The policy direction was that we support the $75,000 base scenario and allow for the blending in period over 2 years so that those MPOs mostly affected by the drop in their funding had 2 years to make staffing changes to meet the new budget. The future funding options is on this agenda, so I'm not going to belabor that. And that was all that was on the
All right, thank
policy
you.
agenda.
We'll move on to public comment. Comments and questions from members of the public are welcome at this time, and staff will also read any public comments submitted prior to the meeting. Do we have any public comments online or in person?
We haven't had a large amount. We did get a letter from the gentleman from the how shall I refer to your community? The England Run community.
Would be from, I guess you'd say, the South Gateway area around the center.
Okay. Regarding the river crossing, they're in favor of a bridge, but not necessarily a bridge near their particular neighborhood.
All right, we'll close that public comment period and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Just a note on the consent agenda, this is only for item A. We moved item B to number 7, action discussion items. Will I have a motion for the consent agenda? All
Motion to approve.
right, second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. We will now move on to item 7, action and discussion items. We'll start up with Carrie, Smart Skill Round 6, C2B update and regional project ideas.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, this is just a review of the latest CTB meeting. Some of you. So at the September 20th Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting, they reviewed, refined, and continued the prior recommendations that the staff made. Those were mostly continued through, like they've been talking about summer. The recommendation to reduce the application cap to 2 and 5. They defined the HPB eligible projects. They continued the recommendation to eliminate the funding for step 2, eliminate funding step 2. They talked about making the land use metric a multiplier for other factors instead of its own factor. And they talked about calculating congestion benefits for 10 years in the future instead of now. There's also a further explanation at the last meeting of the proposed changes to the economic development methodology. One bright spot, perhaps, is a proposal for a mid-level application cap, which would affect us. It's being explored to be presented at the next meeting in October. So they do continue to recommend this, and they're saying it's based on the quality of applications that they've been receiving across the state. This is in tandem with a recommended solution to tie consensus funding decisions to past delivery of projects, not just smart scale projects, but projects in general. So it's how localities have been performing. This would reduce our applications to 2 apiece. Like I said, they are analyzing a middle tier based on size and application strength in preceding rounds. So this may help us. Let's see next one.
Paul?
Sure, just a question on this. Based on what you know of the rest of the state, like, are you seeing, like, is Northern Virginia, Richmond, Hampton Roads, other areas of the state concerned about this, or is it just us?
No, everybody's really concerned about this. Everybody's writing letters, protesting it. There's a lot of outcry about it.
Protesting which item?
All of them, but certainly this one in particular.
They're protesting us having a middle tier.
No, they're
Application cap.
Okay.
But we have had stronger applications than a lot of other parts of the state. And it's because of that and our request to look for this middle tier that they are exploring it.
Can I ask a question about the performance? Did they go into detail on what types of performance metrics would be used in determining past?
So that was basically based on project delivery, like
Okay.
places that have a bad history of delivering projects that have been funded.
Okay.
Affected by that.
So they're not gonna do a complete diagnostic of, somebody's ability to complete projects based on specific things, like, it's just more of a general, did you complete the project on time?
Yes.
Okay,
It's more about the VDOT dashboard, like,
okay,
were you on time? Did you complete the
yeah,
project? Have to give money back because you never completed a project, that sort of thing.
So just a comment from me. I've been talking to some of the people in other MPOs in Virginia through my travels, and one of the things that is clear is that the real problem is with the very small MPOs. They're putting projects that are badly planned, that don't have supporting documentation. They scrape together the documentation, they score really badly, and then they don't get funded. And apparently that's the problem they're trying to address here. The problem is that those jurisdictions are submitting applications that just never get funded because they're bad applications. So it seems to me that the people in the large MPOs and the mid-sized MPOs are the ones that are doing a better job and are going to be the most upset by the reduction in the caps.
Right.
The small MPOs are the ones, the very small ones, shall I say, are the ones where the problem lies, apparently, according to other people. Our problem is that if we keep getting lumped with the smaller MPOs, we're going to get that reduction the way the small MPOs are, which is definitely not good for us. So unfortunately, like you have most things in life, the people who make the mess, they inflict the remedy on everybody else, right? And that's the problem. Some guy screws up, you change the law to deal with that screw up, but now everybody has to fill in more paperwork or do whatever it is to comply with that new law. This is that kind of situation where some small MPOs have not done very well, and now everybody's going to be penalized as a result of that.
Do they have a quality control over these applications? Like, Bamboo, for example, not just this area, anywhere.
They do. VDOT goes through and they will screen out applications.
So how come still?
I think that's the part of the thing is like, if this is not going to fix that issue, it's just going to mean that they're going to submit 2 bad applications instead of 3 bad applications. So why not just actually screen out applications if the staff does not do a good job?
Well, they are going to switch from conditional screen in to conditional screen out.
Yeah.
Now they're going to be screening them out.
I mean, the other question is they're looking for better applications. Why not just be more transparent in the smart scale scoring process so I can submit better applications? Seems like this is not hitting it right where it should be.
We are not the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And-
We're not the problem, and we're going to get lumped with the solution that works for the people who are the problem.
Well, there are those that recognize that we are not the problem, and that's the push for this middle tier.
So we're hoping that that's going to help us. But remember, if the big ones have gone from 10 applications to 5, slotting a middle tier in there is going to be rough, because then you're either 3 or 4. And at 4, we're back to what we had. We haven't even achieved our goal of trying to, anyway.
Great. All right, so this is some more information that's new from last time. They're providing a refined definition of the eligible high priority projects. So as you know, all of our MPO and PDCA projects are going to have to fall under the HPP definition now. This time they have defined the definition, so now we know what type of projects we're talking about. So projects that include the following feature types: new capacity highway, managed lanes, new or improved interchanges, new or improved passenger rail stations for service, freight rail improvements, high capacity fixed skyway transit, transfer stations, and new bridge. So significant projects, regional in scope. This is what we're talking about now. But this is not what we were submitting before. Much larger projects. That's going to really change the nature of giving.
Carrie, just with regards to the new capacity highway category, do we have more detail on what that means? Like, does a intersection project with just right turn lane, is that new capacity, or do you need something like a major road widening?
We were given nothing more than that. I think there's still.
I think there's a hope that they will speak more at the October 17th meeting, but
Yeah, we're gonna get final recommendations in October, as much as we got. They stressed that they wanted large projects, that they wanted regional, like projects that were important regionally. I'm thinking an intersection, probably not regionally, so again,
So there would be a threshold, like it needs to be over a dollar amount?
they didn't say a specific dollar amount, no. They just want it to be important. The idea, a PDC and MPO is supposed to be a regional body. It's not supposed to be a local thing.
They might ask the question, is this regionally significant?
Yes, exactly.
But the criteria, as I'll explain later in a different presentation, is whose definition of regionally significant will be the one that matters, and we don't know. So we're going to have to wait for the next CTB meeting to find that out. Even then, I'm nervous that they're not going to finish clarifying it at the next meeting. It seems like they're building this thing in like rounds of more detail each round. And when we finally get the workbook, the handbook, what's it called?
technically.
The technical guide, we might finally get the definition. And by then we already have to have kind of picked our project. But
Yeah.
that's the difficulty again. They're going to lump us again in the last minute scramble and then get worse quality projects, right? Because they've shoved it in at the last minute.
Technical guide should be in December, I think.
They haven't,
Voting on this until December.
Until
Right.
and they haven't clarified yet, for example, whether they're going to be using the new VTrans needs or the old VTrans needs.
What we've gathered so far from them, which isn't much, is that it will be building off of the VTrans needs, and so that the update will not, where they're telling us will not be taking stuff away, it will just be adding to it. So right now, we're under the assumption that it's like last round, where we're just going to assume that we can use both sets of VTrans needs.
Okay.
That's kind of how we're moving forward with everything right now.
I haven't got a CTB decision on that, but obviously that's staff guidance, which is helpful. Sorry, we're in.
No, that's fine. This discussion is what we're supposed to be doing here, so fine. All right, so the big thing they're doing is eliminating the funding step 2, which is important. It means that so they found that lower scoring projects were being funded over higher scoring ones, and that small projects were being funded with a high priority project funding, and they wanted to do away with that. So this means that now all MPO and PDC projects will be competing statewide against regions with significant leverage funding sources. So that means all of our projects must be a similar type to the HPP project types defined on the prior slide.
PAMPO and BWRC projects. That's got nothing to do with.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'm just clarifying for everybody that your locality projects are not treated like this.
Yeah, that's what I said.
This is only for us.
Right. I want to make sure everybody knew that in the email that I sent out. Not going to affect your locality project. Different set of rules. All right, so the very contentious land use metric. This is currently ongoing. There's a lot of arguing about it amongst the CTB members. As you know, many of us are against modifications to the land use metric. They're recommending a significant weakening for the land use factor. Some CTB members want to remove the metric altogether, citing an urban bias, since it is geared towards pedestrian and bicycles. This metric has been very favorable to our projects. They found there's no bias towards urban projects statewide, but they did find a bias towards small bike and pedestrian projects, and it's pretty much fueled entirely by this metric. So the recommendation right now is to use the land use factor as a multiplier for congestion and safety factor. I couldn't find anywhere what the methodology for that was. Did you?
It's in the CTB presentation. The one from July.
The retreat. I looked. I couldn't find exactly what they were doing. Like I found the list.
Oh, they'll never say exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, they're not, they haven't.
They'll tell you that land use will get a 5, and then it'll multiply the congestion factor by a 5.
I saw that.
That's it.
It sounded like
Yeah.
Just a question, like with the land use factor, isn't that one of the core kind of smart scale kind of criteria that basically might have been in the state code, like they have to do it?
Yes.
So I guess my question is, if they want to take it all out, don't they have to redo the state code? I mean, it would require some general assembly action.
Yeah, so,
During the retreat, they said it was not codified, not in the code for smart scale.
It's a bigger,
It's in their methodology and so forth, but they pointed out it's not part.
I have a bigger concern with this metric. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which is the replacement to a lot of the legislation it rolls over previous legislation that we were operating under. It has emphasized linking transportation to land use even more than in the past.
Right.
And now the CTB wants to go the opposite direction, right? So, because the Infrastructure and Jobs Act didn't specify how do you link land use and transportation infrastructure, it leaves the door open a bit because it doesn't specify how you have to do it. I mean, it's going to be really difficult for the CTB to argue with the federal code that, we can move in the other direction, but they look like they're planning to do it. There was one proposal launched by one particular region to remove land use altogether as a metric. Fortunately, the person hasn't got enough votes to proceed with that. They're serious about killing land use.
I guess, Carrie, I want to kind of move us forward a little bit to that last bullet point you have in that last sentence.
Yeah.
These
Great.
factors total the least points for us in category B.
Yeah, see, like,
Does that necessitate that we may want to have a list of projects that is towards maybe congestion and we change our category to category B? Or sorry, to category A?
oh,
There,
Oh, no.
we changed to B just
Yeah,
a while ago.
for smart scale, at least what Steven said, that, we didn't do it that well.
We did not, no.
Category A.
We were competing against a different group of people. Paul can tell you all the reasons why we should not be A.
Yeah, that's a good question, Matthew. So just the short of it is basically if we were basically back in category A, we're competing against North Virginia and Hampton Roads. And yes, compared to a lot of the state, we do have congestion, but when we compare to those areas, our congestion is generally not as high as them. And that congestion category is like, I think it's 45% for those areas. So what happened is when we were in there, we would be getting like a low congestion score. And that would just like hurt our kind of our project scores. So being in B, like we're competing against Richmond and just other areas where we actually have more congestion, so we tend to do better.
Yeah.
And there was a study that I think the Chamber and FRA did a study actually showing that there was
Remember.
a bias where kind of category B projects scored better than category A for us.
Yeah, the only mention though is just in regards to if we have a specific set of projects that mean a significant congestion need that we want to submit, that may be the path forward. I understand why we moved away from it.
Unless what we are calling a significant congestion need for us is so much lower than the congestion need in those other areas that it's going to be a zero-sum game. We're going to lose.
It's something we should look into, but yeah.
But
But
I'm
it's
sure
ranked against congestion and
the best of luck. Go for it.
point. But yeah, so this is not a good thing for us. They're still kind of tweaking that, working on it, but
Our CTB member is not in favor of removing congestion altogether, but they are prepared to negotiate, I believe.
there are some other CTV members, like the one from Northern Virginia, Ms. Hines, was talking about maybe it could be used in different ways in different parts of state. No, it seems to be useful differently in rural areas and urban areas. I kind of agree. They're still working on it. Okay, so economic development. That's, it's currently clunky. It's time consuming. It's a lot of work for us at VDOT. There's some inaccuracies in it. So CTEP staff reports that the current methodology relies on manual input, only counts square footage, does not prioritize industries that add to the gross state product. It doesn't take into account economic impacts like potential jobs or capital investment. There's no measure for market demand of the site. It's just square footage. So they want to make large changes. They want to use an automated process. something called Virginia Scan. It's a statewide real estate database. So this would narrow the search to properties that pursue core sector industries. Virginia Scan site data is submitted by localities and regions. Then theoretically, it reduces the risk of inaccuracy. So this is how it would work. It's a whole methodology here that is supposedly simple. But there are still issues with using them. At the end of the day, it's seen as an authoritative source, but it still relies on all of the localities to keep it up to date. There's still manual input at the beginning of it. So if a company is expanding or developing the land already, if they already own the site, then it may not be listed, one. And two, if there are missing properties on the application, then there's necessarily no way to add them. And there may be larger issues there. That may be causing larger problems than it's purported to solve. There may still be inaccuracies. There may still be inaccuracies that are not seen because everybody thinks it's updated. So this may not solve.
Carrie?
Yes.
Chairman, if this is implemented, FAMPA will not be able to go and check every one of your localities, properties, and verify that.
Right.
So we will need to ask you all to add a step in your own smart scale process that has nothing to do with smart scale. You're going to have to add a step to go and check Virginia Scan's site for the properties in your locality that you're going to be using to motivate the reason for your projects. So think about that. So you're going to work hard to prepare your project. You're going to work hard to put all the maps and the cost estimates and everything else together. Now there's another step. You're going to have to check and verify the data that's in Virginia Scan to make sure that they haven't just completely omitted a warehouse that you have that's been built recently that's not in the Virginia Scan. Otherwise, you're going to get a bad score for your project. Just realize that.
So one thought on this, I mean, the Virginia Scan, like if all the data were in there, like Ian said, I mean, we might be in a good situation, but concern I would have is maybe it's not all in there today. And I don't know, like if there's any possibility of just asking the state just, for the FAMPA region to give us a list of what's in Virginia Scan.
Yeah. So it's just the state's economic development database, the EDP/sites.gov or something.
So that would just be a small subset of the actual economic development that's going on in the region.
Right. So when I reached out to our economic development, they said that it's just the state's database. And what's displayed on VDP's site might be the full database. It might not. I don't know anything more than just that's what I was referenced to. So.
Well, typically they have subject matter experts at VDP that verify on a regularized basis, because we were working with them several years ago with rail specific serve sites. And so I thought that they'd go to each of the localities and they say, are these sites still correct? Are they still, available, that kind of thing. But I don't know, maybe it's changed since we worked with them, but.
I mean, the one thought I have is like a lot of data needs to be kind of added to it. We might actually have kind of more work this time than kind of prior rounds.
You might have to involve your economic development department.
Yes.
To go and actually do some work so that your smart scale project can score well. And that's like people who are not in this room, right? People who are not in this room have to help us to get our transportation projects to score well by verifying the data in Virginia Scan. So it means we've got to reach out to colleagues and get them on board, because if this gets approved within the next 4 months, they need to go in there and check Virginia Scan, particularly in the areas around your projects.
It's going to require a lot of coordination outside of the transportation planning.
Just wanted to alert you to that
Yeah.
now, because it might happen soon.
There you go, lots to think about. In October, they'll present the final recommendations and another virtual town hall. And in December, the board acts action on revised smart scale policy. Hopefully we'll know what's happening and what we need to prepare for. So that's the summary. Projects must adhere to the new HPP definition. No standalone bike ped, it's gonna go through. MPO PDC projects must provide clear solutions to high COSS RN VTrans needs. Leverage funding is going to be much more important this round. Going to need to coordinate with VEDP to update for Virginia Scan. Applications must be complete. Like I mentioned earlier, they're going to be screened out rather than conditionally screened in this time around. And now we can move to the preliminary regional project suggestions for discussion. When Connor comes back, I will hand this over to him. But this is just going to be, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, and you guys can talk about the projects.
Has everyone sent Carrie projects?
So, Spotsylvania, Fredericksburg, and Stafford have also projects.
Awesome. Does anyone else sending us projects?
So,
Caroline, King George, Erie?
yeah, so I mean, I still haven't gotten internal buy-in on this yet, but we're exploring submitting the yard expansion down at Crossroads as a potential smart scale project. Because right now we're in a situation where the cost is significantly higher than what we originally budgeted for, and we might not have sufficient federal formula funds to it. So smart scale, because it's linked to capacity, is one of the, like, we typically score very well, you know, on smart scale when we go in for big money. So
That'll be a VRE application.
yeah, it would be a VRE application. So how would that work with the?
You would just need a letter of support from us.
Okay.
From the MPO.
Again, I haven't confirmed anything internally, but I've been talking about it in the office, and I think there's some support for it. So
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So are you saying that you would not submit a regional project for this? VRE would not, or request that be part of the project list? I just want to clarify.
I don't know exactly the mechanics, but the scope of the project would be yard expansion, so additional tracks, and potentially additional rolling stock.
But you would use your slot instead of the regional slot for FAMPO, more than likely.
Yeah, probably more,
I just
because we
wanted-
wouldn't have, you know, other slots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess the question also is Caroline and King George, obviously this is FAMPO, but FAMPO, we make the decisions here on the GBC applications as well in a way, so.
I mean, I don't make any decision.
Well,
Question?
not decision, Caroline and King George, have they sent anything as well?
They have not sent anything. I will be working with them as part of the RWP on their locality application.
Okay.
And if there is anything potentially regional in scope, we'll get back to the TAC on
Okay.
that, but they did not send anything for the call.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna meet with them on, day with you guys, October 16th, so their meetings can be a little longer after talking to Leon. Just so we can go over everything a little bit more in depth.
The key is going to be regional projects, right? Don't send us an intersection upgrade. It's just, for us to prioritize an intersection upgrade would be just a waste of a slot. Just don't do it. Unless it's like a concrete flyover or something, then yes, okay, we can do the intersection, but don't send us like, you want to add a little turn lane on an intersection. We're just not going to get it funded.
And Carrie, I know it's not included in the packet, but could you send out the full list of city, Stafford, and Spotsy applications?
Yeah.
Potential projects to everybody after? Thank you.
Yeah, and any from Carolina and King George if we get them. So, I mean, I think we are happy to hear comments from all of you, but there's not much point right now trying to pick projects because we don't know what the criteria is actually going to look like. We only have this rough idea and nothing's been voted on at the CTB. So I think first thing we should do is collect from everybody suggested projects and then sort them. And then the second thing we should do is look at the current existing VTrans needs, corridors of statewide significance, all those other things, and separate the lists we get from everybody into two groups. Ones that meet the known VTrans needs and things on corridors of statewide significance, etc., and those that we don't believe do, just to give the TAC some feedback for the next meeting. So we don't remove any projects, we just sort them into brackets. So you'll get them sorted by what we think is going to happen with them. And then out of that, I guess we can talk further in the next meeting about projects that we think are likely to rise to the top. But I'm hesitant to get involved in an argument about which projects we want to include because it's too early. If they mess with those criteria, we may have a different scenario. Like worst case scenario, we're going to get only 4 projects, right? 2 from FAMPO and 2 from GWRC. That's it. That's the worst case scenario. If they come up with a mid-level, we might fare it better. We might get 3 or 4. And 4 only puts us back where we are now, doesn't actually give us any more slots.
So just a question on the schedule, kind of for the state wanting FAMPO and GWC and the localities to kind of have their projects. As Ian said, we're waiting kind of for more information from the CTV, and it's maybe kind of premature to kind of pick on this list, but like when is the state hoping for us to decide what the projects are?
So after we meet with you guys in the next 2 weeks and everything, because you're gonna be meeting the 16th, you're doing the 13th.
Are those meetings to discuss local projects for smart scale? Okay.
I mean, that's why we're gonna have FAMPO, GWRC there as well, so that you guys are in on the discussion and everything. Most likely, we're going to want you guys to have something to us by the beginning of December.
Before the CTB voted.
Only because then the L&D team has to start working on schematics and everything and cost estimates. And since we're down to 1 team, and still need to work on our actual projects, they're gonna need time for that.
Can I ask a question to VDOT? You've got a bunch of vacancies now. How quickly are you working to fill those vacancies? Because it's going to affect us.
Yes, they're doing their best to get them filled. The problem is a lot of the L&D vacancies require PEs, and they are not getting people with PEs applying for the positions.
The pay too low?
No, I would say our pay is actually comparable and everything. It's just I had this problem when I was in Texas. It's very hard to get PEs, especially for transportation related projects and everything and positions.
I know there was discussion about potentially bringing in consultants to help.
We are going to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I just significant concern about us having projects selected by the beginning of December when we don't have a final CTB list. I don't see how we could send an actual correct list without knowing what the CTB is going to do. So that's the only concern. I mean, I think we should be submitting what the current rules are. We should be submitting 4 applications for FAMPO, or 5 pre-apps for FAMPO and 5 pre-apps for GWC until we know what the CTB is doing.
So the last time when we had this problem, it seems to happen every damn cycle, we submitted a list. Stephen will recall he asked us to submit a list, but the VDOT district added the disclaimer that should the final rules knock out our project or 2 projects or 3, we would have the opportunity to add an alternative one because the rules have changed.
I believe, I'll have to verify that with Kathy when she's back, but I wouldn't see why that would be different this time around. If for some reason a project would get knocked out based on whatever the updates are, then we would most likely allow you guys to then submit an alternative project and everything.
So
why that would be different.
So we should try to get you a preliminary list in December, and we may need in January to add one or change one or something.
Yeah.
Okay. I may need to call a policy meeting in December in that case, because November's too early.
So just a question, like, at the November TAC, we may still not have enough information.
Correct.
Should we actually have like a special meeting at some point for the TAC just to talk about
So
smart scale?
there is a CTB meeting on October 17th, and there's a CTB meeting on December 14th.
None in November.
So we will not, as far as I'm aware, but we will not, we'll have recommendations in October, final decision.
In December.
So there's nothing that we can.
You don't want me to tell you what I'm thinking, right?
We can
That's-
put the
I just wanted to.
review. And, it might fight the.
You might have to wait till January.
That's why I was suggesting at the very least with the application caps, submit what we know is the current policy, and we can go down if we need to.
We're gonna go down.
Right. I mean, I think the HPP policy for, types of high priority projects is C2B has not provided many comments on that, CTB members. So that seems like that one's pretty for sure going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm
That-
going to be met with the state planners and everything on that one back in August. So, and that's when they told us and everything that they were contemplating doing that second step, and they heard our pushback, and, obviously it did not matter, so it's most likely going to happen for that,
Yeah.
at least that one.
So, I mean, I guess be careful if you send FAMPO a bike ped project. It's probably a waste of time, is all I'm saying, but.
Well, a standalone bike project, you can put
Standalone,
it
of course, you can
can
put
put
bike ped on.
together with the road upgrade.
Of course.
Agreed, and you can send, in pre-scoping time period, you can send multiple projects, right? So I think do that, send several good quality pre-scoping time period projects. And down later.
Yep.
But I definitely agree, you're gonna have to adhere to the new rules. They're not gonna change that.
Yeah.
The other thing we might want to suggest to our localities is that let's say you've got 10 projects you really care about. You try and reduce that to 3 that you want to argue for, because you might get one. Like if this goes badly, you might not even get one in your locality, right? So just bear that in mind. Try to think of what your priorities are. And the priorities that you have obviously have to align with these new damn rules.
I mean,
It's no good wanting a bike path really badly.
But the localities have different rules.
I mean, for the regional projects. I'm not interfering with your.
I mean, I can tell you
locality.
from the staffer side, we will not have a finalized list of, at the very least, our local projects until, beginning of February. So just the schedule that we're on with our committees, our master plan and all of that, it's not happening before then.
We don't mess with your locality
It'll-
projects. That's up to you.
It'll merge into some of the MTO projects as well, but we'll see.
So just on this list, a question on the Lafayette Boulevard project. So is it safe to assume, based on the way things are headed, that probably the project that was submitted last time, this under GWC, would likely not be eligible this time? That was mostly a sidewalk project, but it did have a intersection project at Old Greenwich.
Yeah,
It was a right turn lane.
think it would need to have been one of the earlier Lafayette Boulevard projects that were like more roadway involved, like because it was 2 jurisdictions involved with a big roadway project with bike ped. I think it would need to be more along those lines, but I know that ran into.
Now, like that particular project could still be on a local list.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, ready to move on?
Conscious of time.
Yep. All right, item B, Regional Transportation Authority update and report. And a reminder, we moved consent agenda item 6B, endorsing the UPWP under this item as well.
So Connor, if you can click on these slides, I'm not going to go through every single one of these slides because it's such a topical thing. I think you probably all already looked at it because they've been in your pack, etc. No, not that set, Connor, the one in the agenda. If you can just go to slide 3 and then slide 10. So these are the questions that the policy committee, I suggested they talk about, right, in the workshop that they did at the policy committee. Should we be going after more federal and state grants? How do we use local match funds? Whether FAMPO or GWRC or localities individually should be going after the grants for larger or regional projects. Whether and to what degree to support a regional transportation authority in the future. Do we need consultants to assist with larger, more complicated project applications or employ additional staff here at our office? Go to slide 10. Remember the background to this. Yeah, the background to this is that we've had 3 times in a row now, a state delegate or senator propose a regional transportation authority for our region. All 3 times, they've not spoken to us. They've not spoken to FAMPO. They've not spoken to GWRC. They've drafted a piece of legislation. They've shoved it into the legislature. And we have been unhappy as an institution. GWRC has been unhappy as an institution about that because we have no way to influence that particular piece of legislation. We have no option to say what we like or dislike about it. Last time was Senator McPike, and we got it. I asked Chip to go with, and we went, drove down to Richmond. We sat in his office. We talked to him about his bill, and honestly, we received no level of comfort that they had spoken to anybody in our region. Really, that's the impression we had. However, we suspect that this is going to happen again, depending on who gets elected. We don't know who's going to get elected, right? That's all up to you voters. I don't even get to vote in the local elections. I'm persona non grata when it comes to US political parties and elections. I'm not allowed to get involved. Rightly so. So you're all going to vote, and you're going to vote for people. They're going to get elected. They're going to go down to Richmond. I'll put lunch, not for all of you, but maybe one of you, on the fact that one of them, and maybe multiple of them, is going to propose another regional transportation authority. Which means we then have to, again, in January, get on the phone, start phoning people and tell them just not vote for this, tell them why they shouldn't vote for it, call for meetings with senators and delegates to ask them why they don't talk to us, why they don't, and it becomes a mess. So I've been trying to encourage the policy committee in thinking through two things. First is, what is our future funding scenario? How are we going to raise the funds for larger projects, for more expensive projects? Because every time we turn around, VDOT adds a 40% contingency to anything, right? So the amount we have to find for these projects is just going through the roof. All federal grants require 20% local match. State grants often require a match unless you get it fully funded in smart scale. There are 3 exceptions, but they offer very tiny grants.
Have not, just quickly, all federal grants, there's some more rural grants.
Yes, I said that there are 3 exceptions.
Oh, okay.
And those exceptions are usually for small amounts of money, and they don't usually cover FAMPO jurisdictions. They usually are like something in Caroline. However, when you look at the dollar value of the grants that don't require a 20% match, it's such a tiny amount of federal money that it doesn't give you a lot, right? So yes, it's 100% grant, but generally the federal grants require 20% match. Smart scale, as you've heard multiple times now, there's an emphasis on cost benefit, which means if you put $0 down, it's going to be harder to win the cost benefit lottery for smart scale. So they come along, and we're the area in blue, right? Those others exist. We're the donut hole in the middle that have all the congestion problems that the 3 RTAs around us have, but we don't have an RTA to raise a little money to fix the congestion. Connor, just go to slide 12 and 13, please. So we worked with the FRA, the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, and the University of Mary Washington, and they, without charging us, and we're very thankful for that, produced this report. And it looked at these options. What does the Richmond RTA do? What does Hampton Roads do? What does Northern Virginia do? And the last bill that came across our desk was the McPike one. So what does his bill propose? And those are the numbers that are there. Go to slide 13. So I need to just explain this slide a little bit so that you understand what's going on here. Those dollar values are not what currently comes in from those transportation authorities. Those dollar values are, if we used their methodology and copied their legislation with all of those taxation amounts in, and we applied it to the population and the sales and everything in our region, that's how much money would be raised in our region using their method to get that. So using the Richmond method in our region in 2024 we would raise $62 million. Using the Hampton Roads method in 2024 in our region, we would get $86 million, etc., etc. The McPike model is 18 million. Many of the amounts in the McPike, or a chunk of the amounts in McPike model is taxes that already exist, not new taxes. But a chunk of that money gets given to Hampton Roads for their transportation projects because we don't have a vehicle to put the money into. We don't have a regional transportation authority. So the money is already taxed here, that a chunk of that 18 million, but it doesn't come here. It goes to build that tunnel in Hampton Roads currently. So McPike's proposal was to bring the money back effectively, and he added an additional small tax to it. Next one. Go to 14. So John just took we've got a spreadsheet from the UMW board, and we used that to run some additional scenarios. Go to the next slide. So that's option one. We took McPike's basic idea of bringing back the funding that goes to Hampton Roads, and then we added to it a retail tax rate. In each of these scenarios, what we've done is we've not used the same tax rate that they're using in Northern Virginia or Richmond or Hampton Roads. We've reduced it. So in other words, we're coming at a lower rate so that we don't disadvantage businesses in our area. So they use 0.7, we're using 0.5 to give an example, right? So we're still at a lower tax rate than Richmond or Northern Virginia. Those colored blocks you saw on the map that are all around us, they use 0.7. So we've put in at 0.5, and those numbers gives you the likely outcome in our region. Next one. Next slide. In this model, we did not add a retail tax, but we did add a gasoline tax and a diesel tax. And there, again, we used a lower amount of cents on the gasoline and the diesel tax than what they use in Northern Virginia or in Richmond or in Hampton Roads. So we're trying to come in at a lower tax rate than everybody else, so we don't price ourselves out of business, but at the same time we have some income, and that gives you the dollar values of a likely scenario. Next one. And what this third one does is it puts those together so that if you wanted to go the whole hog and have all of those options, that's the likely outcome, right? Just remember, these are models. The exact dollar value is going to vary depending on the economy, depending on how many sales people make, depending on how much gas we buy. And based on Chris Garcia's model at UMW, he has taken the average gas purchase per person for the state of Virginia. We believe that in this region, people buy more gas than the average because 40% of our population commutes to DC in their car. So they're buying way more gas than the average across the state of Virginia. So that gas and diesel tax is on the low end of the likely outcomes, right? It's probably, and we discussed this with Chris Garcia, and he agrees with us that that's a conservative number. It's probably going to be a bit higher than that because he's used a conservative number to do the calculation. Okay, Connor, now if you can pull up the other set of slides. So I did this over the weekend. Laurie Hayes was requested at the GWRC board meeting on last Monday that we particularly involve jurisdiction staff in considering options, right? So that's all of you. So what I've done here.
Sorry, can I just make a one comment, basically back on slide 13?
Sure.
You've done this the last presentation, but the question is basically, so right now the region has like kind of like a transit RTA for PRTC and VRE that has a 2.1% motor fuels tax. And basically like on the slides, maybe it was the wrong one. go to the ones that show the gas tax.
Go down to the bottom
Which one number?
there.
And like that one right there that shows like the gas tax where we're kind of, I guess, doing maybe something more similar to what Hampton Roads, Richmond do. I'm not sure that we can actually go that high because we already have that tax to a certain extent.
So this is
today.
the point I was making is this is less than what they're doing. If my recollection is right, they do 0.07. John, is that right? So we're doing 0.05, which is almost the 2 cents that you're talking about.
Well,
So
it's not 2 cents, it's 2.1% of like it.
Okay.
The floor is 3.17, so I think it's at least.
so we can adjust this, right? This is just a projection. So we can
Right.
pick a different number. There's no this is scenarios. It's not nobody's made any decisions about anything.
And the point.
One thing, this is Bob Schneider. I've got to literally bail in 2 minutes. So just wanted to point out, the existing motor fuels tax is collected by PRTC, which is an independent commission. And then we as the commission, then redistribute the funds at the request and behest of the 6 jurisdictions. So in essence, it's collected on behalf of, and then within that subset, there's the operations board for VRE, which is basically allows the commission to then the 2 commissions, us and NVTC. So it's really a money collecting solution to solve a choo-choo train problem. It then just gets used for construction projects, et cetera. But the disbursement of those motor fuels tax money is exclusively in the hands of, for example, Spotsylvania County. So Spotsylvania collected revenues get spent in Spotsylvania County for projects approved by the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors. When you come in and you put an authority, you're doing it's again a revenue collection source, but the independent authority then has to set its own classifications, qualifications, their own version of smart scale, if you will. And for example, the NVTA, or the Virginia Transportation Authority, has theirs called transaction. So multi-billion dollars in expenses, it funds transit, it funds roads, it funds bridges. It does not fund, non-congestion related activities related to certain things. It can fund technology, but bear in mind that it's really just overlapping funding. And the one thing I will finally add is whatever you do, try not to tie it to a gas tax. Because even though in 2020 we indexed the motor fuels tax to inflation, the motor fuels tax collections remained flat. So even though the revenue per gallon pumped is higher than it was in 2020, it is flat revenues and it has nothing to do with the pandemic. It has everything to do with electric vehicles and has everything to do with miles per gallon traveled with cars. So those are my caveats. Have a lovely day. I wish you guys the best.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you.
So we indexed this against Richmond and Hampton Roads, but Northern Virginia has got additional gas taxes. So they're at a much higher level, but it doesn't come directly into their authority because they have older legislation that was already collecting gas taxes, which is already spoken for, right? So they have a vast number of gas taxes in Northern Virginia, which we don't have in Richmond. So we've taken the lower existing of them, which is Richmond, and we've reduced it below that again by another 2 cents. Now, what we can do is to get a model run that takes into account the one that you're talking about and says what that looks like per liter of gas or per whatever else, and then tries to identify a number that will put us not worse off than Richmond. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, just whatever that delta is.
Yeah, we can do
between
that.
What we have and kind of what Richmond and Hampton Roads use. I know that theirs is indexed to inflation, but as Bob said, it may still be kind of a flat revenue source.
So I'll get to that in the second set of slides. But what we may need to do, which is why we also want to amend the new PWP, is that we may need to get an expert to run that model for us. We may be able to do it in-house. John does do some amazing things. But I like to get an outside person to check it, right? Some economist or somebody to just run some numbers outside of us so that it's a little bit removed from what we do. We'll try and do that particular model ourselves, but I would suggest we ask somebody else. It doesn't have to be a big expensive study. You just need a guy to put a spreadsheet together and pay $1,000.
In the interest of time, let's move to the next set of slides.
Hold on, I had a question about the assumptions in this. So does this assume that the localities that are currently paying into PRTC would pay into
Here, this is
the
nothing,
future authority?
nothing to do with PRT.
So we are not going to interfere at all with PRTC or with the VRE. None of that.
This is
This is a
additional on the top.
completely separate thing, and we're not going to mess with that at all.
Okay.
Sana, please go to the other set of slides.
The concern I had is I didn't want us to have the most expensive gas in the state.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say you would be double taxing.
So that's what we need to work out what that delta is. Next slide. So these are points of discussion that we need to decide on, right? And we don't need to decide today, but Ms. Hayes was very strongly wanting me to get the message that I need to hear input from the staff of localities in particular. So I am listening. So please feel free to speak. So these are kind of 5 things which we need to decide on. And so feel free to give your comments. The membership of the board, the name of the authority, the taxes and fees to include or exclude, the distribution of the funds, and an initial set of projects. Next slide. So all of the current RTAs and the bills that have been proposed have got, first of all, representatives from the jurisdictions, and they're all identical. All of them have one representative from each jurisdiction. And you'll see why I think that might not be the right thing for us.
Can I very quickly, doesn't CVTA, while they have one representative from the jurisdiction, they have a weighted voting system?
They do have a weighted voting system, so does McPikesville.
Okay.
But don't worry too much about that. The representatives, there's one from each jurisdiction. They're all identical. I'm not sure that's right for us, though. The second thing is that they all have representatives from the Virginia House and from the Senate. That's where I think it's problematic for us, because we only have maximum of 5 jurisdictions involved, right? So if you have a representative from the House and from the Senate, you have a representative of the CTB, which was proposed in the McPike bill, you only need one jurisdictional representative to side with those 3, and you've got a 4-4 split, which means you can block anything, right? So I think that's a bad mix. However, to go along to the people who actually have to vote this into being and say to them, sorry, we're removing all of you from our board, they might not like that so much. So I'm thinking that a compromise might be, and I need to hear your opinions, that we have 2 representatives from each of the participating jurisdictions. Because then you don't have people that are at the state level that can outvote the localities. So that's my suggestion for you to think about. A gubernatorial appointment, McPike did not have that as a voting representative. You might think that that might be something you want to do. I don't think it's necessary, but you might. A representative from the CTB, McPike did have that as a voting member. You might have a view on that. And other non-voting or ex officio members. For example, if none of those people on that board knows anything about transportation as their expertise area, in other words, they've never qualified as a planner or an engineer or whatever else, you might want 1 or 2 non-voting people on there to give tips and advice. So you might want to have a VDOT representative to just give information. You might want to have
Having a transit agency representative.
yes,
If they weren't already a full voting member.
exactly. So I think that you might have to have a bunch there of non-voting ex officio members, and we can give some thought to that. I think, and you know, I might get hit by a bus tomorrow, and then somebody else has to have this job. You might want to have the FAMPO administrator on there, You might want to have, I don't know, right? Whatever. So those are the kinds of things I'd be very keen to hear your opinions on. I do think that we must be careful to make sure that the local people have at least 50% of the vote, if not more. I don't think you should load it. The reason why it's a factor for us is because in the other jurisdictions, in the other RTAs, when you have 17 members of the board, it's okay to have one senator and one House delegate. But when you only have 5, the weight shifts to the out of region people. And I think that balance we should keep local, right? So you do that by adding additional jurisdictional representatives.
So why not just have 3 representatives for each jurisdiction as we currently do?
Can, but the bigger your board gets, the more difficulty you have with things like forums and voting and all that kind of thing. But you can, I mean,
I guess then there's a thought of the weighted voting as well.
yeah, that's covered in detail. Cool.
So I wanted to speak to that as well. So with Northern Virginia and Richmond, they definitely have weighted voting. I'm not sure what Hampton Roads does, but if we were to have a GWC kind of RTA of some sorts, 80% of the funding would be generated by staff in Pennsylvania. So we are not in favor of having equal vote.
So there's
the other jurisdictions if we do that.
Yeah, so there's a McPike's bill says that you have to make a decision, have 3 things in place. You have to have a majority of votes, but then you also have to have a weighted vote, which is that you have to do it by population, so that you have a you have to have 50% of population representatives also vote in favor of the thing. So they have a 3-check system. McPike's bill I'll send to all of you to read, but it has that proposal built into it already, that you first of all have to have a 50% majority to fund anything, or a 75% majority to fund anything. I think it's bigger than 50. And then you also have to have an additional weighted vote, so that it gets to your point. You can't have a just get a 50% majority to fund a project. It would require a population, 50% of the population would have to, representatives of 50% of the population would also have to. So you've got to do a calculation on the population as well. It's multiple, it's harder to fund a project. You've got to get multiple votes, not just one vote. Next slide. So what do we call it? I don't know. I just say don't call it the Fredericksburg Area Regional Authority, because someone's going to make it fart, right? So just don't call it Fredericksburg Area Regional Transportation Authority, because that's just not going to work well as an acronym. So I don't know, pick a name. Maybe you have a favorite name. I don't know.
I think it depends who it encompasses. If it encompasses Caroline and King George, it should be GW something. If it encompasses just the 3 Famp localities, it should be Fredericksburg something.
I like using rivers.
So the others like have shied away from names. So it's the Northern Virginia, the Central Virginia is the one in Richmond, and the Hampton Roads has got a weird name. It's the Hampton Road. What?
HR TAC. Yeah.
Hampton Roads
Transportation Advisory
Accountability Commission. Yeah.
Accountability. It's crazy. Anyway, so like, if you have a suggestion for a name, please give it.
You'll name it after you, the Ollie board.
No, I don't name anything after me. But next one. So here's where the options are. So grantor's tax and the transient occupancy tax are the 2 that McPike had. The retail tax is a solid bet because it's forever into the future that it will bring you a regular income, right? It's not likely to, the economy would have to implode for that to dry up. The gas tax and the diesel tax are the problematic ones. We would need to do a study of how the VRE, I'm going to call it the VRE tax, how that
Owns buses too.
yeah, how that factors into that. And then, so I was talking to one of our colleagues in one of the other RTAs, and I said, what about a highway use fee? Because we have one already. if you buy an electric vehicle, for example, you pay a highway use fee because you don't pay gas tax, right? And that covers you for a year. So I suggested that because the gas and diesel tax will slowly dry up over time, what about a highway use fee to make up the difference, because you're covering the people who don't use the gas and the whatever else. And the response was, well, please will you do it, because then we can add it onto ours as well. So they're very keen for us to do that because they don't have it currently, and they're realizing that the gas tax and diesel tax is going to slowly reduce over time. There is a highway use fee in the state. So again, like with the gas tax, you would add a small amount on top of the current highway use fee if you did that to cover electric vehicles. Those are what we think are the options. So if you have a view on those, we're very happy to hear the views.
So I guess what I'll say is we're not necessarily against any of these taxes, but I guess I just want to make the point that in Spotsylvania anyway, basically traditionally the county hasn't been in favor of new taxes. So basically, if a RTA is proposed with 6 new taxes, that might be kind of a hard sell. Just commenting on those, like in the gas tax is one that's like already around, so that might be a little more palatable. But the retail tax, and that's a hard one. I know it's a lot of money. But also with Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads to get their RTAs, they had to basically try several times unsuccessfully before it actually got approved. And I'm not sure when the deadline of trying to get draft legislation together for this General Assembly is, but like in the next couple months, like it might be a tall order to get regional consensus on a additional sales tax in that type of time frame.
If you keep it, so I'm hoping that if we model these and come out lower than all of our neighbors, that we may be able to squeak through, right? Because there are already retail taxes. It's not a new thing. Concept is not new. It already exists in our region. So if we add a small amount on top of what exists, I'm hoping it won't cause as much offense. Because first of all, it's not a new tax that already exists. And secondly, if we can keep ourselves below what everybody around us is doing, we're still better for business, because you pay less here than you do in Richmond, for example.
Do you have a revenue generation goal?
No.
Can I make a comment? I actually have 3 specific comments. One, and you might have mentioned this, Ian, at a previous meeting, that there's success found when an authority or a revenue raising effort is tied to specific project, and it's codified in the creation of.
We'll get there.
Hang on.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, yeah, because I think that would be very successful here if people can see, oh yes, you're raising taxes, but over the next 20 years, there are 10 projects that you want to accomplish.
If Matthew and Jamie can exist, it can exist, because that's
separate issue.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next comments first.
Okay. Well, so the 2 other things, in Richmond, they have a modal breakdown, which presents, and it's codified into the founding of the authority, and that presents a lot of issues. Because like for transit specifically, I think only 15% of the regional funds can go to transit unless the localities say, yeah, we want an additional project in there. I think, that's a lesson learned, maybe to not be so rigid with the modal breakdowns in this region. And then also one of the taxes I didn't see up there was a tax tied to new development, both commercial and residential development. And I don't know how that would actually specifically be levied, whether it's levied on the developer or the purchasers of the new homes. But that could be a way to tie, land use with transportation improvements if, the developers are having to pay more for the impact that they're causing to the region.
There is what's called impact fee. I think Stafford County is one of the only, if the only locality in the state who has an impact fee. Basically, just each development pays an X amount per housing unit that gets built. I think. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a good idea.
It's difficult. Very difficult.
I won't get it done by January.
No, yeah.
All right, Melody.
I was just gonna say for the highway use fee, did you say, Ian, that one could also, you could put the gas tax in there instead of get rid of like that? Like
no, what I'm saying.
Both.
Okay, so let's just be frank and honest. The future, a comedian in South Africa once said, the future is certain, it's the past I'm not so sure about, right? Because politicians rewrite history, right? No, it never happened, So the future is somewhat certain here. the federal government is cleverly funding some pilot projects of using a mileage-based tax rather than a gas tax, right? And the reason I say it's clever is because instead of them having to face the public backlash for doing it, they're giving a whole bunch of places in the US the money to do it themselves so that they face the public backlash, and then the federal body can look at the public backlash and see whether it's going to work. But what they want is a mileage fee and do away with all of these taxes because they're not working so well.
Yeah.
So the interim step is to have a highway use fee for the vehicles that don't use gas. So those three together, the gas tax, the diesel tax, and the highway use fee, should cover everybody.
Okay.
But what I guess is going to happen is that 10 years from now, the federal government will make a decision on getting rid of those three and replacing it with this new thing. But we don't yet have the new thing, so we have to go with what we have currently.
All right. Hassan, you had a question?
I just wanted to comment on, I see like 5, 6 taxes and you're looking for more. And basically what we're trying to do here is trying to tax citizens, to pay more money.
Including us.
And we are not asking the profit, these companies to provide these taxes. And to me, I think it's just, we keep asking citizens to pay more and more. That's fine, but why can't we put all of these like in one category and call it whatever, highway tax or something? And
so companies would also have to pay retail tax. They would also have to pay tax on the gas of their trucks. They would also have to pay diesel tax on their trucks. So on land transfers, they would pay one of those land transfer taxes. So they would be paying as well.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
Next slide, please.
I pay on my car taxes.
Okay, so don't worry too much about all of this detail, right? The questions, and please do comment on this. I want your input. So each of these RTAs gives a percentage of the money that comes in straight back to the locality in which it was raised. Paul, this is to your point to a degree. So Northern Virginia gives 30% back to the jurisdiction. Richmond gives 50% back to the jurisdiction. And then the balance goes to projects. So do you have a view on that?
Very quickly, that distribution will be based on revenue or population?
It'll be based on where the money is raised. And it's done by the state comptroller, not by us.
Yep.
I think you have to ask as a region, like how regional, like your citizens, do you only access the goods and services within your jurisdiction, or do you go outside of your jurisdiction? Do most citizens of your jurisdiction go outside? And if so, then a higher percentage, I would think, of the revenues collected should be for regional projects, and then a smaller percentage back to the locality for specific. Look at it.
On travel patterns.
Yeah.
So it's
Like Northern Virginia, I like the 70-30 split because it does keep the bulk of the revenues, for transaction and for their 2-year
I
allocation.
think it makes sense to propose something that's in between what's currently there. You either go for the minimum, which is 30%, or I think you said the maximum, which was the 50%.
So those are the two that our neighbors use. So Richmond uses 50 and Northern Virginia uses 30 that goes straight back to the locality without any deductions. It's just automatic transaction.
If you look at what Richmond's doing, if it's 30%, that's what, 18 million.
Richmond is doing 50.
Sorry, if you look at what
Northern Virginia is using 30.
yeah, so it'd be like 15 million or something. That goes back to the localities per year. So
For transportation projects.
Yeah, so I guess the concern that we have basically with a large amount of money going regionally is we do not appear to be on the same page with regional projects. Instance, the river crossing, the city and Stafford support that. Spotsylvania is strongly against that. Would not want a situation where there's a bunch of regional money. It all goes into that project and we're basically kind of strongly against it. And there's nothing we can do about it. So
Here's one thing you could do, but I'll get to that in the next slide.
well, we could shut down FAMPO, but that's
No,
not
no,
a
no.
great option.
Nobody wants to do that.
he did not mean to say that on the record.
So
Keep it out of the minutes.
I think like from a Spotsylvania perspective, we would prefer to have as much of the money basically go back to the locality as possible. I will say as staff that we are open basically to having some money go to Fred. Maybe have like a regional kind of, Fred kind of,
Pond.
right, pot of money, which would enable them to be their own agency, separate from the city. I'm not sure how much money would be needed for that, but, that basically something we're open to consider.
Okay, so I'm not going to bother with the rest of that slide. If you can give me your views, as I say, the standard is 50% to our south and 30% to our north, and I get Paul's point. Next slide, please. I want to show you something. So this is something that is not required, but which has been suggested more than once, right? And that is that you agree, first of all, an initial set of, Paul, those regional projects. So before you sign off on the percentage, you ask, well, where's the money going? And so it doesn't lock you in forever, but you do list the initial projects up front. So you can pick, say, 5 projects and say, we will fund these first, and then we will get a scoring mechanism to fund others. It gives jurisdictions some level of comfort that their needs are considered. Paul, that the money doesn't all go into the bridge, right? That there's a list of projects. The list of projects doesn't get put in the legislation, but we do an MOU between the jurisdictions that are participating to say, we will fund, say, the interchange on Harrison Road, Paul. That's going to cost money. You've got to do a study. You've got to build the interchange as well as the bridge, not just the bridge. You've got to get onto the I-95. It may be those lanes that you need money for. Maybe Spotsylvania wants a southern bypass. I don't know. I don't know what your projects are and your priorities are. Caroline, I know, is very worried about the fact that they're widening the road up to the I-95 and the bridge still only has 2 lanes, right? That is a project that, they're going to want funding for. And I know in King George that, is it 206 or 208 that comes from Dahlgren down to
206.
Courthouse, 206? The model shows that by 2050 it's going to be very congested, so that road's going to need an upgrade, right? And the city may have a view, Stafford, etc., right? So you can prevent all the money going to the river crossing by agreeing a set of the first 5 projects, for example. And then after that, you fund additional projects. I'm not telling you which projects they should be, but this is an additional way to secure the concerns of the jurisdiction.
I think you're gonna have one main issue though, is your river crossing costs 300 million.
Yeah.
Harrison Road costs 150 million dollars.
Yeah.
Your revenue generation in 5 years, if you base it off of like Richmond, is $300 million.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a while before you get to the point of having a local split, before you get to the point of
Not a
having.
problem at all, because
Well, it's 5 to 10 years before you start to have.
No.
Yes.
No, you're forgetting a bunch of things. First thing is, you don't necessarily 100% fund a project through this thing.
You're not.
You go after a federal grant, and then this becomes your 20% match.
Or smart scale.
But you can't.
Or a
you
smart
can't-
scale
You
grant.
can't guarantee that that's gonna happen.
No, you can't, but the
You
point,
You can't bet on it's gonna happen and then say, well, we'll be fine.
No,
That's the issue.
but the point is that you can agree that you will fund 50 million for each project, right, out of this initially. And then if you get number 2 and number 5 funded through a federal grant or small scale or whatever, then you can apply the rest of the money to the other 3 projects. There are various ways of cutting that cake. I don't think we should be, if we can help it, 100% funding a bigger mega project just out of this. I think we should try to buy the pot, get a bigger leveraged amount, and then get the balance from small scale.
Yeah,
or federal grant.
I was going to say this kind of money would be really helpful in winning some of the smaller, like the turn lanes, the signal timing, the bike ped infrastructure that smart scale is looking to get away from. That also you might not be as competitive for in federal transportation. But I really like this idea because it's going to take a couple years to build up the reserve of money to even start making projects. And in that time, when the authority is created but no projects are being done, you're planning. You're doing a couple years of regional consensus building. And then on year 2 or 3 of that, when you've got enough money in the pot built up to start spending, and to do a call for projects or whatever the methodology might be, you've already got the priorities lined up. And it might just be 5 priorities over 10 years because it takes that long and that much money to do those 5. But I think there should be at least 5 or so projects that everyone in this room can agree need to be done, in the next few years.
I would just say I think it is important to your point of finding what the projects could potentially be, because if we work backward, I think we'll probably see that we have more regional projects that we're willing to commit to. 2, unless we have regional projects that we identify and agree upon as localities together, the legislator is only going to vote on a bill with projects attached to it that obviously look good for them. So I think that regional cooperation ultimately will be important if they're on the board. I would say if you're asking for feedback now or later, a Survey Monkey or something with comments that we could provide maybe an easy way instead of reply to this email. But I would say to the river crossing that, the city agrees to the river crossing study. What that looks like and what we will vote on may not be what we're hearing today. It may be based on the data that comes out of that study. So I think as we go through this process of determining, I do think we need to kind of push forward quickly because that it's going to come up. 2, that we need to make sure we're in front of it because the legislator is going to put on the table what they want to put on the table. And I just think having the projects that we can potentially agree upon, because at the end of the day, I know what's going to happen. Y'all know what's going to happen. Weighted voting because y'all are bigger, and the city's going to say, no, we don't want that. But I think we can get there, and I think there's a path forward, but we really do need to make sure, because the last meeting for the board, they did state that they need to figure out how to work more regionally, because if not, what we're going to do is end up basically ticking each other off, because we'll create a project that works well for us and then messes up the flow of traffic through your region or through your city or county and vice versa. So I think this is a good mechanism. I think we owe you some good feedback, and I think we should talk about projects at some point. Mr.
Yeah, and I would add as well, to the point, just when you get to the end of having that list of say 5 projects, get a model run done so that you can attach those numbers to whatever publications you have when you're looking for votes. You can say, we have this model run of these 5 projects. It will reduce our regional congestion by X%. And that will be kind of one of the ways that you can kind of try to build support for it.
Okay, so
yeah.
we don't need a formal vote. I am okay to put out a survey. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Asking everybody in this group to
Sure.
give some feedback. And then if we can go to the second item, which was the UPWP amendment.
Before we can move on to that, but just what is the next steps? What is the path
So I'm
forward?
going to send you a survey.
Okay.
You're going to give feedback. I've been asked to draft a bill, and then we're going to send my draft, which is South African Minds draft, down to the drafting office in Richmond at the legislature, right? And say, please look at this draft. Does it make sense in terms of Virginia legislation? Is the wording correct? Have I put too many South Africanisms in it? I'm going to essentially build off of my proposal because it's quicker to do that. And then I'm going to steal sections of text from the Richmond, Hampton Roads, and Northern Virginia bills. It's also quicker for drafting if you copy and paste. So I'm going to blend those into a bill. That bill, then I'm going to make available. I just did the discussion draft with options, right? Do you want option A or the gas tax or the whatever else? So you can play with those options. And remember, we're not going to vote on this bill. It's a lobbying document. We're not doing lobbying, but it's a way that you can express your views through drafting something that they can use.
Is this going to be for next policy committee meeting or future TAC meeting?
It's for discussion
Yep,
at the
of course.
next policy and TAC meeting. It's not for voting.
Just really quick, Mr. Chair, I do agree with Paul. Whatever the option is that takes into account the VRE, PRTC, OmniRide tax that's currently in place, staying under that tax when we combined it, it's just as an option.
Yeah.
So I just want to say I do agree with
One thing I'll reference, you can look at, I can forward this to you, but OmniRide's motor fuel tax report, PRTC's motor fuel tax report, and that'll give you the exact Spotsylvania, the city, and Stafford all generate based on that 2.1%
Okay,
tax per
thank you.
month. Adam?
Is there, when you do the survey, instead of just one answer, could we rank them?
Oh yeah, I'm going to give you like, do you want to give back 30, 40, 50% of the total to the jurisdictions, that kind of thing?
Rank them.
Yeah.
And then more of a larger discussion as well. I don't know, if you're looking for something by, seems like bills are in December.
Yeah,
Something like that. You're going to need a list of projects by then. So
I don't think personally that we should put the list of projects in the actual bill. I think we should have an MOU between the jurisdictions that are involved. Because if you put it in the bill and you want to make little changes to that, you're stuck with it, right?
Okay.
Yeah, just as a list of reference more.
Yeah.
But we do need
Can
to
have an MOU that the
I
jurisdictions
guess
can all
what's the
sign.
general comment is by the time we get to that point, it doesn't need to be in the bill, but we need to have some sort of
We're going to work on it.
TAC policy, whoever needs to have some sort of workshop to understand the projects. And that probably goes along with smart scale.
So what we can do is ask each jurisdiction to give us suggested projects now that we can put in a list and start working on.
So just one question about schedule and logistics. So the election is coming up. So we're going to have maybe 2 or 3 new board members. I know that George is going to be very affected by this. I heard Matthew say like we need to decide what we're doing like by December.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have a new board coming in, or someone new board, I mean, that could change things. Where's the mechanism just to get their input?
So Kathy Bender said, could we make ourselves as staff available in January to go around to all the jurisdictions and explain to all the new members how it works?
Yes.
That was their suggested remedy. They won't vote on this thing in December or January, but they'll shove in draft legislation, right? This was what we'd like to vote on later on in February, March, or April, May, June, etc. So the idea is that we get a draft piece of legislation together that we can present to legislators as our suggestion. But of course, at the end of the day, they can do something completely different. We have no control. But at least if we have the region, all 5 jurisdictions, more or less agreed on a draft, we will then take that draft to the new folks that arrive for their comments, for their understanding, to explain it to them. If they all say, this is a terrible idea, stop immediately, we'd have to communicate that back to the legislators and say, hey, the new people don't want this, we can't proceed. But we need to get a draft in, because what they will do is if we don't give them a draft, they're going to write their own draft, which will have that balance between the state and the region, for example, on the board, not in our favor. Another thing in McPike's bill that's wrong is he refers to the PD16 long-range plan. There's no such thing. Because we have a rural one and an urban one, because the federal highways demanded we do that. So it's better that we put in a draft piece of legislation to them as an example of what we want, to get them to not put in rubbish, things that don't even exist.
So with regards to, I guess, what I would call the second draft, basically after the new, local elected officials get office, that could happen like at the end of January or something like that?
So we're going to be very busy in January. Well, I will be very busy in January with your help, explaining to all the new folks. I mean, we might even want to call a meeting just of new representatives, right?
Just confirm the General Assembly schedule. January is pushing it.
So December and January, they submit new legislative proposals, which don't get voted on in January. They then go to committees, like the Senate committee, so the point is, if we at least get a draft in that's more or less what we want, if we make changes, we go to whichever senators or delegates get elected and we say, hey, there's one change we would really like because our new members really feel strongly about this one extra thing. You can get them to change it in the committee.
The last question is basically with Bill, last time he offered the 15 million. Do we know, is that still on the table this time?
Unless you disagree, I'm gonna put it in the bill.
Right. Well, that's great, but I guess I'm just wondering, do we know if that's a reality?
So it only failed by 1 vote in the Senate. in the committee. So I'm thinking that they were okay with it generally.
All right, we want to move on to the UPWP item.
Yes, please. This is to allow us to do this because VDOT have called us and said, hey, please don't do any work on this if you don't put it in the UPWP.
Paul, you pulled it from the consent agenda.
Yeah, so I guess, so like just having it in the UPWP for research, we only get that. The question I had, and I guess if you go to the top, I think it was one of the first whereases. Maybe they can look at this. Yeah, I guess my question is on that second whereas, do we have to be as specific to talk about basically drafting legislation? And the reason why I say that is I'm not, I said that my board is undecided.
So
but if they see that, I think they might think this is premature.
well, their vote 13-0 at that last meeting was for me to draft legislation to actually use those words. However, we can soften it. We can say prepared documents.
Just remove the word draft. Just say prepare legislation.
No. Take out the word legislation. Just say prepare documents. Would that be better for you, Paul?
Yeah, I think it would be better. It might not raise alarms.
Okay, so we're going to take those two words out, Becky. So the one that goes to the policy committee would say prepare documents.
Yes, sir.
All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, moving on to item 7C. We are through 2 items. We have 6 more to go. So
I'm
we
hoping
remove this
that, oh, I beg your pardon. So this, we don't have to make any major decision on today. All we're asking is this something we should work on, right? So you saw there that Smart Scale is being amended and the regional projects category, the HPP category, is going to have this focus on corridors of statewide significance and on, what's the other category?
Regional networks.
Regional networks. So Route 3, or as you all say, Route 3, is not a corridor of statewide significance. Yet it is one of our 3 biggest congestion problems in the region, as you saw on Connor's wonderful 3D map. So the suggestion here is that we investigate lobbying the state with a memo, or encouraging the state with a memo, because I'm not supposed to use the word lobby, to consider Route 3 as a corridor of statewide significance. John, what is that figure of trucks? Can you explain that?
So right now, as we start off doing some very preliminary kind of commercial and freight traffic movement, particularly on Route 3 and Route 17. And what we can say is that as vehicles are coming down that corridor from Culpeper, from the foreign trade zone area, the inland ports, for every about 3 freight trucks coming through Route 17 through Stanford County to the interstate, you actually see about 2 coming down Route 3. So
for every 3 trucks on 17, you have 2 trucks on Route 3.
So you're looking to about a quarter of the freight traffic that's coming from, particularly from the Culpeper area or down the traditionally what is now the Route 17 foreign trade zone, going down to Richmond, DC, or Hampton Roads. About a quarter of the traffic uses Route 3 and continues on. So but if you look at Route 17, it'll come in from, say, Stafford County through, and then hit 95 and disperse. You don't see that same pattern of 3. You actually see more through traffic, and you can actually see the traffic kind of slowly building on through, both going up to Maricopa in particular, as well as it continues down the northern neck. So it does a little bit less volume, but it does a whole lot more through.
So the question is this something that the committee would want to support?
So the question is, does the committee want us to investigate this further? Because we're not going to do more work on it if you all think this is a bad idea. The potential downside is that you must remember that if we get Route 3 declared a corridor of statewide significance, it's the whole of Route 3. So it includes the section of Route 3 and the northern neck. And that may be for some people a bridge too far. However, it would help us to get smart scale funding in the future if this is included. So that's the calculation we have to make. And we want to know whether you're in favor or against the idea. That's all we need.
Yes, we strongly support this.
All right.
Can I ask just a clarifying question? Would this have to go through OIP through their
Yeah, it's
long-term planning?
it's got to go through the whole process, but we don't want to waste time drawing up the memo if nobody thinks it's a good idea.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea.
I don't have an issue with it.
Okay, I don't have an issue with it either.
Good idea.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't, you
Yeah.
we'll need a letter from you, so we're asking you also if you could help us.
On to item 7D, draft
Done.
vision statement.
So I'm hoping this is also quick because I've tried to take everything controversial out of this statement, right? It's really hard to try and get FAMPO 2075 vision statement because, as Paul put it so eloquently earlier, people have concerns about regionalism and they're concerned about giving away their birthright to FAMPO. So I try to keep this as neutral in language as possible. And I want to recommend this to the policy committee. I've been trying to say over and over again that we need to have a vision, we need to have priorities, we need to have projects, then we need to go after funding, and then we need to build these projects. So it's got to all fit together. So I'm trying to get a vision statement, and then we add to it all the other pieces as we go along. Now, we've discussed all of the items through the whole process up to funding in the policy committee, but they've never actually committed to anything. So I'm trying to make this just 2 pages of the most innocuous language I could think of, to see if we can get agreement on this. If we do, then those blank, scroll down. Those blank objectives, I've left them blank on purpose because I want to try and get agreement on those basic principles, and then I'll put some more language in there for next time, and you can consider that next.
Question for the committee, is there any comments on these basic principles? There's goal A, goal B, goal C, goal D, goal E, and goal F.
Are these okay? Is it innocuous enough?
I take no comments as yes, they are.
Oh, hold on, I'm still processing.
It's been in your pack since Wednesday.
Yeah, and these are the generally similar to the LRTP rules as well, with some changes, but
Yes.
where it was taken from originally.
I don't think there's anything. No, I didn't. I just sat at the airport and.
So which goal would include like fostering regional collaboration or something like that? Because wasn't that something we talked about, last year?
I would argue that it covers most of these goals.
I'm not saying it doesn't or does. I'm just asking where. Which one
Central
does
and
it?
connected communities imply that you have to connect the communities.
Yeah, well, that refers more to like infrastructure, but I'm talking about like from a governance perspective.
Growth, because you need
Yeah.
a region to grow besides the economic.
I think resiliency.
I feel like that's something that should be in FAMPO's vision statement, is if you're going to continue to be a regional body, it's not just the projects you fund and these things, it's all of us, it's promoting a regional conversation
So
towards consensus.
I agree.
That's a softer thing that doesn't get reflected in safer travel or efficient mobility or.
just scroll up again, please, Connor. The vision of FAMPO is to move people and goods efficiently, create jobs, and strengthen our communities by pursuing those things. You want us to add something there about regional integration?
Yeah.
Could you just add it to a resilient regional integration, something there? I don't.
Like regional cooperation?
Yeah, like literally something as simple as, promote or foster regional cooperation, collaboration and cooperation.
Cooperation or collaboration better than integration. Integration.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
That sounds very.
So I will add to that
Regional cooperation.
regional cooperation
Collaboration.
as an additional bullet.
All right, are we good on that then?
Yes.
Yeah, cooperation and collaboration.
All right, I'm glad we were able to cooperate on that.
Done.
All right, Ron, item 7E, quickly.
Okay.
So this, all of us in this room should have caught.
Yep.
But we didn't catch it.
That's next one.
That's next one.
Sorry.
Jumping ahead, but all right. Just a reminder that the call for projects for CMAQ, and if you are currently open, you can go to the next slide. The due date is November 30th. We're going to be using a slightly different calendar this time around than previous. We have a delay on what's going to be our screening. That's the next slide.
My fault.
Just a reminder that we will be looking to reach out in December to probably schedule kind of the post-screening, post-submission meetings in early January. And then we're going to offer a very short turnaround window to that so that we can go ahead and start scoring things probably, hopefully, as early as February.
Alright.
So we'll probably slowly be doing that as we.
Back one slide, John.
Yes.
I have two comments. One more longer term comment. With the approval of the methodology, we removed a 2-year program. We will talk about that sometime next spring and what that schedule will look like. I'm assuming we'll be able to give us some more time, basically.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then the second question, in January, please include detailed scoring, not just the overall scoring for a project, but why the project got a specific score. Its VC ratio was X, so it scored a 8 out of 10. Please include that spreadsheet. Since I know it gets created when you actually score the projects, it'd be useful to understand how they scored and why.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have that by February.
Good. Well, it should be in January.
Well, we might not, I mean, the end of January is probably when we're going to be as a goal to do it. It will not be for the January TAC, but.
When will draft scoring be?
For the January TAC, remember, it's like
Right.
very early in January.
That's traditional is. So that's gonna be, depending on when we wrap up all of our post-screening and then any other submissions, you're looking at, I mean, fastest 2 weeks after that deadline, depending on what happens, it might be longer. It depends on what the applications.
Can you live with by February?
I'm just a little confused because when you have a score, you build the score based off that data.
Yeah, you might not get the score on the 6th of
Well,
January.
no, that's what I'm asking. Is our scoring be presented in January or would that be February?
Yeah. We're gonna try to release, depending on what happens, we're gonna release email with.
But by the end of the month, it's not in time for the January TAC meeting.
But my thing is, it's always depending on how much revisions we're gonna allow for each of the applicants to put in through their thing. So this is kind of like it depends on what y'all give us and how fast we can turn around for it.
Okay.
We will give you the spreadsheet.
Yep.
There's no problem with that.
Cool.
Quick question though, based on this schedule, when are resolutions of support?
So resolutions of support are due by the end of the month of November, but we always have a kind of a built-in that if it's all of that success.
This year, it must be this year.
I think it's like, but it's actually up to about 30 days.
Any further questions? All right, moving on to the next item, John.
Okay,
Seven.
so the next presentation. So with all edits, there's always one more thing to handle.
John has a very corny sense of humor, which you can see, and that's.
So during the process, during the revision process, and this is what ST, noticed it after we got approved from the TAC the last time around. In the editing process, is that one of the key points that was taken out of the previous rounds was that for STBG projects is identified the current LRTP. During our meetings, we noticed that, hey, what about if it's in a county plan? What happens if it's in a different plan? That should still be eligible. It should not be required to be in the STBG. Well, during our editing process, there was consensus to remove that. There was discussion, I think, in March to either replace or doing, but it never got consensus, so that line got removed. And then when we adopted it, there's no requirement for STBG projects to be in any current plan.
So in CMAQ, you remember we put in a very long line, including any type of plan you can imagine, right? So the CMAQ one has got a very well developed list of, it must be in a study or a plan or the county plan or a transportation master plan or a whatever plan, what's the one, TSP or something. We made a very, very long list. But we didn't, this is an oversight, we didn't copy any of that information across to STGB for some reason I can't recall, and it happened a year ago now, so it was 6 months ago.
My notes is folks wanted a lot less stringent requirement as far as the planning. The trick is it was removed and nothing was added as a result.
Correct.
Made it less stringent to being, there's no requirement screening process for this. There's some items that have been scoring implication, but it's not required.
I tried to get agreement on the phone and was unable to do that, so we didn't change it. We took to the policy committee the documents that you all voted on, right? We didn't change them all. But that means that now for STGB, you don't have to have it in any plan, any study, anything whatsoever, nothing. If you read those things, the only thing you have to do is get a letter of support from your jurisdiction. That's the only requirement. And we think that is possibly not sufficient, but we didn't make, as FAMPO staff, any changes. We left it like that for your discussion.
So could this be resolved just by kind of taking the CMAQ language and putting it into the STBG?
If there's agreement on that, yes.
And the CMAQ language is?
I don't have that immediately up. It's a bit more restricted, and there's actually discussion on that it should be less.
Okay, Connor, just please click on the FAMPO website, go to CMAQ and STGB, click on the CMAQ methodology, and open the document, and you will find on page, there you go, down, there, the CMAQ one, open it, there you go, scroll down, go to prioritization, project screening, page 9, there, blow that up, there's the answer. There, project is identified in a current adopted local, statewide GWRC agency plan, transit strategic plan, or the FAMPO long range plan.
We're just going to copy and paste that third bullet right into the STBG.
Yep. Anyone have any issues with that bullet?
No, sir.
Nope.
I would just note they would have to specify for highway, active transportation, and transit projects. So intentionally, study projects are supposed to be outside of that because we would not expect a potential study to be.
So John, you'll copy and paste that and just put in brackets at the end, excluding studies.
All right.
Thank you.
You're also lacking the 30 days for the local support.
Ask all in favor.
Oh, you're saying we need to include that?
What?
That's an additional thing that's lacking, is that very last thing about the
project requirement.
The time frame for submission of the local support, 30 days, is lacking in the STBG now.
Okay, can we add that as well? I wasn't aware of that.
No issue.
Okay. Is
No issue.
everyone in favor?
Motion to approve?
All right, Paul.
Second.
All right, discussion. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome.
Done, thank you.
Motion carries. All right, moving on to item 7G, endorsement of the NEPA study for river crossing with Michael Baker. Contract.
So, Mr. Chair, what we did was, as I promised the policy committee, we put our request out to multiple on-call consultants on purpose in order to get a cost-effective quotation and process. Cambridge Systematics declined to put in a proposal on this particular project. They said it's not their wheelhouse. They're more on the legislation and that kind of consulting. So we got two proposals, one from VHB, one from Michael Baker. We then asked VDOT to give us input on both proposals because VDOT ultimately would be involved in this if it becomes a construction project. They gave us comments, they suggested some changes. We put those to the two consultants and got their feedback. We then constituted a staff level panel. We invited the TAC chair to join the panel. We also invited VDOT to join the panel, again, because it's a roadway project. VDOT declined to participate in the panel. They said that they felt they didn't want to look like they had undue influence on the MPO, so they did join the panel. So it was the TAC chair and FAMPO staff. The panel met, and really the panel felt unanimously that the Michael Baker proposal was better, that we would get a better product, and the price is lower than the VHB proposal also. And so we recommend to the TAC that we proceed with Michael Baker as the preferred consultant for this particular project.
I have two questions. One is related to the image on page number 9. When you do a traffic impact study, you also look at background developments. Because those will generate thousands of additional trips that would need to also be calculated in the model because they're getting built. Doesn't seem like that's something that they are looking at too much. So for instance, on US 17, we have a development to put in several hundred units just south of I-95,
So
east of I-95.
their projected future scenario model would have to include those.
Yeah,
Right.
let's say on, what is it, on the first page,
I missed that.
as following activities will be undertaken by Michael Baker, review plan to identify development within the project area.
Yeah, they don't talk about like adding it into the model or anything.
We
Under the
will
modeling section.
we will make a note
Okay.
for ourselves that we will require them to do that.
And they also didn't provide too much detail on intersections they chose. They just said critical intersections. Because this whole area around Stellar, Virginia, it's going to have significant impact on some of those intersections, but they're not proposing to study any of those intersections, which is quite concerning. They're proposing to study number 9, which is Banks Ford.
So no, hang on. This is the congestion modeling. This is not the
correct.
The synchro or vism modeling would have to do that. But
these are
this is for the travel demand model to calculate the benefit, right? So to calculate the benefit, you've got to run the travel demand model to look at potential impacts on congestion. Are you saying you need additional gateways on other roads?
I'm saying that these are the intersections they're proposing to study to get traffic counts for input into vism.
And you want some more?
Yeah, I feel like it'd be helpful for them to study intersections within Stellar, Virginia, and some of the surrounding roads as well, because it's going to have significant impacts on those.
What intersections?
Green Bank Road, Sanford Drive.
What's the stop sign? Right. I mean, that's going to be some.
I mean, it's still going to have impacts, right?
Well, I mean, if that.
You're throwing a road across it.
So those options include the 4 options include Green Bank Road.
But you're not studying those intersections.
Well, for the build scenario, they have to.
They're not. They have to have inputs into the traffic model, which is these 25 intersections.
I mean, we can ask them. I don't know. What do you think? Should we ask them to put another gateway on Green Bank Road? Is that what the remedy is?
I get what Matthew's getting at with that. I don't think it would hurt.
Okay, so we can ask them to put another gate on Green Bank Road. And do you want one on Celebrate Virginia also?
Yeah. I mean, you're putting a road on. You're putting a new road on Celebrate Virginia and or on Green Bank Road, so they're going to have significant impacts on those roadways.
Okay, done.
So basically, there's a VDOT Route 3 study going on between the west side of 95 and Church Road area. So there's traffic data available there already. VDOT's purchase. We think that it would be good to look at some locations on Route 3 in Spotsylvania, just to the west of Bragg Road, to see what the impact would be. That has been a big concern of Spotsylvania, just negative impact.
I think that's a very good comment. Very good comment.
And I think, Paul, you were also saying we might be able to use some of that data, but I would just confirm.
So if we can,
it's the same type of traffic.
Duplicate the points that the gateways that they're gonna make the count on anyway for the other study, then we don't have to duplicate and count twice. So if the data's already there, the gateway's already there, if you can just tell me where they are, I'll tell Michael Baker, put the gateways there because the data will already be available.
Just confirm that it's the same type of data. They have TMCs and 6-hour counts and tubes and video ADT, and they scope from proposals.
We'll find that out.
Yeah.
Offline. I think that's a good idea. Very good comment.
So one
and a good comment from you too.
Question, just with kind of the cost. So right now the cost is $623,594. The STBG budget, I think, was $600,000. So where would the additional funding come from?
So the additional funding is PL funding, FAMPO, so the 23,000. We accrued a little bit from you remember the time when we didn't have staff?
Yes.
So there's a little bit of rollover from that. So the 23,000 will pay out of PL funding. It's in the UPWP already. You don't need to investigate it.
Not investigating.
I don't mean that in a sinister way. I just mean it's in the UPWP already, so it's already been publicly answered. It's not
How many
a secret.
public involvement meetings did they put in?
So there are two big stakeholder public involvement workshops in public, not here. They have to be off-site. And then there are 6 FAMPO committee meetings they have to present at in person. And then there are 2 that they're going to present online to be back in feedback, I believe.
Anyone else have any comments regarding this proposal? It is endorsement of the resolution to approve.
To approve.
All right, do you have a second?
Can I just make one comment?
Yeah.
Sure.
But you got a second?
Yeah.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, all right. Second, any discussion?
So quick comment, we're going to vote against this, just so everyone doesn't support, it's not personal.
Sure.
That's it.
We will remember this.
Any further discussion?
When Paul needs that interchange on Harrison Road and the I-95,
Discussion.
then you can vote no.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Good.
Okay, we have 2 native votes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Item H, VRE system plan update, Mr. Baker.
Nick, you're between us and our next coffee, so.
I was gonna say, so I have 25 minutes.
Okay.
No. It's a 2-hour meeting.
It's actually at 3. It's actually at 3, so I've got.
Nick, you have minus 4 minutes because we're already 4 minutes over.
Now, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but most people in this room, especially the localities, have seen a part of this presentation previously.
They might have seen a few pieces of it, but.
I know we met.
So I'll try to go as quickly as I can. I'm going to provide an update on our system plan 2050 update process. We're going long range. System update, it's done roughly every 10 years. We're about 2/3 of the way done with our update process right now. We're into phase 2. We've taken a look at some nearer term 2030 service alternatives. And you think of 2030 as a long way away, it's basically 6 revenue years away. So that's like now, right? And then we're now starting to transition the board at our meeting in October in 2 weeks to getting them thinking about the 2050 or the more visionary alternatives. So I'm glad we're having a conversation earlier about regional transportation authorities because I think a lot of that's going to dovetail very nicely. Back last year, we had the board adopt this vision. VRE is looking to grow to serve the region as a transportation service of choice, blah, 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 blah. You can read the rest. But I think the first half of that clause is really important, that we are intending to grow our service to be the transportation provider of choice, specifically for folks who are looking to travel outside of our region. These are our adopted system plan goals. At the top, safety and reliability, but obviously we are in a growth mindset while making sure that we stay financially stable through 2050. We're looking to enhance our regional system integration and also do so in a sustainable and resilient. Back at the beginning of this phase, we had 22 scenarios. I'm not going to go into the 22 scenarios because we're 7 minutes over time. But we were able to winnow those down to a list of 4 2050 service scenarios, and I'm going to be presenting them very briefly at the end of this presentation, and we're going to be discussing them more in detail at the board meeting on the 20th of October. We took a little detour on our way to 2050. The board wanted us to really hone in on the 2030 service alternatives, and so we're calling 2030 alternatives because we can, these are implementable things. These are things like grow service by X number of trains, do this, run express trains, whatever. 2050 is still going to stay fairly visionary. It's VRE will, be bidirectional. It'll be uniform headways, whatever the board is interested in adopting. So we actually have a 2030 alternative, board recommended 2030 alternative that they're going to approve or recommend for approval to the commission in spring of 2020. just wanted to recap this because I think this is something that some of the jurisdictions have seen before. But between 2030 and 2050, the FAMPO jurisdictions are expected to grow in population by 35%. That's by far the highest percentage growth of population of any of the other service areas. And so essentially VRE is looking to respond to that growth. A large percentage of that growth is going to be, travel. There's going to be folks that are going to be needing, local travel. That's not something that VRE is going to likely be able to serve by 2050. But for the folks that need to go outside the region, either north or south, that's the bread and butter right there.
Which data source did you use to get to a 35% growth rate?
This was from a combination of the COG model and the FAMPO. And so Cambridge Systematics, ironically talking about, they helped us with this stuff.
The highest growth rate we've seen for the last decade is 22% in Stafford, and then 15% in Spotsy and the city of Fredericksburg, and although I guess that's 10 years, and you're looking at a 20-year. Yeah, so okay, that makes sense.
Because right now
That's
it's 15% between a couple of years ago and 2030. So.
That's a scary number, people.
Yeah. And it's
only if you don't have a house.
And you're looking, I mean, we're looking at ways to respond to this and potentially favoring the Fredericksburg line because we don't have to go into all the Commonwealth initiatives like transforming rail, but essentially there's more opportunities to add more service post 2030 in our region than there is on the Manassas side, but it also aligns with the projected growth.
Agreed.
So we looked at travel markets, right? What are the origin destination pairs within VRE's, sphere of potential influence that have the highest level of beyond 25-mile trips, right? So these are people taking what we're considering long distance trips. People have to drive for more than 25 miles. And this one's in the top 3 for weekday peak. It's the Caroline County, west of 95 to central Fredericksburg, South Stafford, right? So today that might be considered a local trip, but it is along the existing rail corridor, right? Tomorrow, as in 2050, that could be something that could be supported by commuter rail. I mean, can you imagine today trying to say, hey, take a commuter rail train to Fredericksburg? People would say, oh, why? But future, more people might be coming into this region, working in this region, living in places like Caroline and Hanover County.
So you're going to put a station in Caroline and then run the train from Caroline to Fredericksburg so people can commute to Fredericksburg?
Well, right now we're not really looking at specific station locations. We're just trying to identify the zones in the region that are producing the highest number today, producing the highest number of origin destination pairs. Another one that pops out, but it's not in our region, is Potomac Mills. And so this is just showing where these long distance travelers are coming from. Where do they live? And it's not surprising, right? They live in places that are far flung from goods and services, right? Stafford County, Western Caroline, right? These are people that they don't have a lot of local employment, or economic opportunity, so they're going other places. You're also seeing a lot of that popping up in other parts of the DC region, like up in the Panhandle of West Virginia and down the 29 corridor all the way down to Colton. Right. Interestingly enough, when you look at the weekend trends, you're still seeing that pop in kind of we call this area of Spotsylvania, the mall area of Spotsylvania, right? Like that area, parts of North Stafford, and fairly significantly parts of Central Carolina. Although we felt like this was probably because of Kings Dominion and Meadow Events Park attracting a lot of that, that travel. But interesting data, but it shows that you think the corridor is bad today, 2050, it's going to be a lot more people, with a 35% additional growth in the region. And they're already making these 25-mile trips.
So what's the difference between the map on the left and the map on the right?
Weekday.
Thank you.
And this is by origin. So this is where people are originating, likely where they're living. And, it's agnostic of where they're going, but they're going somewhere else in Virginia.
Yeah.
All right. This is a weekday list of the top 25 origin destination zone pairs today, right?
So you see that the one that pops out in this region that's within the VRE sphere of influence, that's the current or potential future catchment area for VRE, is North Stafford to DC Core with 845 trips, followed closely by Caroline County west of 95 to Central Fredericksburg, South Stafford. So in total, there are 3,100 trips to or from the FAMPO region in the top 25 that are within the VRE region. So, multiply that by 35, 1.35, and you've got yourself a pretty considerable number of trips that are just emanating from this region that are potentially servable by commuter rail. But here's the real thing, right? This is Saturday. Look how many more trips are being generated by the FAMPO region, and you can get a sense of what's going on here, right? So where are they going? They're going to Potomac Mills. They're going to the mall, right? And so I think it underscores that there's a lot of, interregional and intra-regional travel because people aren't necessarily living where there are things that they can do. And so they're making these 25 plus mile trips that are gumming up roadways and causing congestion. And you see kind of a similar thing, although slightly less scale on Sundays with the Doswell, Southwest Bowling Green area to Spotsylvania between Route 3 and 208, which is the mall, basically. And that's where those are. Any questions on this before I go on? Again, transforming rail in Virginia is going to allow VRE to expand in ways that we were never able to before. We didn't have the mechanism to. And so the Commonwealth and VRE, because we're funding a portion of these improvements through bonding against our CROC, our commuter rail operating funding, for the next 15 years. So I like to say that the Commonwealth built us a house and we got to furnish it, right? And so it would look silly to have a big, huge, McMansion living room and one couch, right? So we're trying to add more service in ways that makes the best use of the state's capital investments. But the pandemic did us a number, right? And we're showing, based on the help from Cambridge Systematics and our other consultants in projecting future ridership, we're going to be just basically back to where we were pre-pandemic, 2019 timeframe by 2020. So, and that's assuming that VRE does nothing to our service. We still run our 8 trains up, 8 trains back on the Fredericksburg line, and same on the Manassas line. We're going to be somewhere between 18,000 and 13,000 daily riders, which is basically where we were pre-pandemic. So the whole impetus for looking at 2030 alternatives from the board's perspective was, how can we move that needle further? How can we either ramp this up so that we're back to, a more fiscally sustainable operation in the nearer term, or that we can start to adjust ourselves to serve markets we weren't serving before. Remember, close to 70% of our riders work for the federal government. So you have something like what was going to happen this week with the shutdown, it leaves us tremendously exposed to those kinds of swings in ridership. So what the board has recommended that we pursue is a 60% increase in weekday service. So that's adding 10 round trips between now and 2030. So you basically, Fredericksburg line would go from 8 daily round trips on a weekday to 14 daily round trips on the weekday. And initially dipping our toe in the water of weekend service, going from 6 round trips system-wide, so that's 3 round trips over here on the Fredericksburg line on Saturdays and Sundays, to a full 7 round trips.
We have none right now.
We have none right now.
It's going from 0 to 7.
And if you pay attention to our board's progress and some of the recent discussions on the fiscal year 25 budget, they're actually looking to adopt a weekend service pilot project earlier than what we've called out in the midterm planning documents here. But that's kind of that's Saturday only. It's the 3 round trips on each line. But that's kind of to respond to some of the board members' requests that we do something sooner rather than later. But when you add this to the number of Amtrak trains that are currently operating the corridor and the new Amtrak service that
BPRA is looking to initiate by 2030, you've got a pretty considerable amount of service on the weekends and on the weekdays that's serving this region. Now, we hope to allow VRE multi-ride customers to use Amtrak trains again through a reinstatement of the step-up program. We got $1.5 million from NBT choice funding to be able to do that in this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So look out for that as a way to start to build service. For the graphic learners in the room, this is basically what we're doing today. And, so you don't need to know what the specific alternatives are, but essentially it was alternative A that the board was interested in pursuing. And so you can see just how much more service we're looking to provide to the region by 2030.
And Nick, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like there's some express routes, or no? Okay.
So the Fredericksburg line by 2030 would have 2 additional round trip VRE expresses. And so what we've conceptualized, because responding to the growth and responding to some of the surveys that we've done in the region that have called out specifically the need for faster travel, more reliable travel, we're looking at it at we call outer zone expresses, right? So they're serving a couple stations on the far end of the system, and then they don't stop until they get into the.
And the question would be, Spotsylvania Union Station is an hour 37. What are you looking at, I guess, from Fredericksburg to Union Station if you do some of these express routes?
So while we don't have the specific times, nailed out, because that's really going to depend on in the year we implement what's going on in the corridor, what will CSX and Amtrak allow us to run, because remember, this corridor is still going to be dispatched by CSX for the foreseeable future, and of course, Amtrak controls Union Station. However, you can look to what Amtrak does in the corridor at run times.
Yeah. Okay.
And get a sense that that's basically,
I guess what I'm actually trying to get at is, it takes an hour to get from Fredericksburg to DC, in essence, without traffic. So that generally should be the goal of VRE, should get to that without traffic goal of around an hour. I know that's not possible right now, even with express routes, but just the end goal, I would think, should be somewhere around.
I have to tell you that Amtrak southbound is currently quicker than
about 45 minutes or something like that.
There you go.
quicker than driving a car.
Yeah.
It
So
really
that-
in the morning. In
yeah,
the afternoon, it all goes to hell because it snarls up in Hampton Roads and Richmond.
Like that's your end goal. That's how you get people to ride, because it's quicker without traffic. People aren't paying $40 for express lanes. They'd pay $40 for VRE. But
They are paying though.
So my question to you, and I mean,
I'm not.
So I have 100 questions, but the one I think that I'd like to just lay out now is just, it's kind of like a business case question. So DRPT and the VPRA are agnostic to who provides the service, right?
I wouldn't make
But
that.
you're not, because you have to run your service, right? So it is in your interest to not help your customers get a better service on Amtrak. It's in your interest to get your trains full.
Well, yes and no. So the benefit of providing step-up service is it is really expensive to buy new railroads. And if you're going to expand service,
I get it.
you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that.
I get it, but you have some on order from the Chicago package deal, right?
Yes, but that is literally just to add one additional round trip on each line plus spares.
Okay.
21 rail cars from the Metra order that will arrive by fiscal year 26, I think. But we're talking to implement this service. We're talking you're going to need 11 consists on the line and 8 on the Massachusetts line. That's more than what we currently have in terms of rail cars.
The most important thing from my point of view, and it's just my opinion, so take it from where it comes. For me, the most important thing that VRE can do is go after new travel markets on the same corridor, but new travel markets, because you, in my opinion, again, only my opinion, are a little bit too beholden to the federal government. And anything the federal government does hammers you positively or negatively.
Yeah.
And so the more you can have other travel markets on the same corridor, the better your long-term sustainability is. So I encourage what you are doing for these new travel markets. I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And the only thing missing from this is the advertising to go along with it. And again, just my opinion, and it's not about you, it's about this institution, which has been around for many, many, many years. VRE marketing hasn't been the greatest.
Well,
On social media, it's okay, but outside of social media, it's not great.
and can I let you in on the dirty little secret? I mean, when we were running packed trains, we were actively dissuading. That was the whole point of the Step Up program was don't ride our peak trains because
They're too full.
Yeah, you couldn't find a seat, you'd stand for an hour and a half.
So we've increased our marketing spend by 49%. That is definitely, I mean, our CEO is big on the
It's,
concept of butts and seats, of,
I'm not saying that you're not spending money. I'm saying that it's not good advertising. I'm saying that the quality of the advertising, maybe the place you're putting it, maybe the kind of, I don't know, but I only see you on social media and I'm a consumer, I'm the public, right? I only see you on social media, not seeing you anywhere else. And I think that's a weakness in the marketing. Again, you don't do that. It's not about you. It's about the total VRE package. I think they need to rethink how they are reaching the public because the social media is not enough. It's got to be some other things as well.
I think as trans in general, I think we all have that struggle. Because your choice rider, you're not going to ride us unless, but our commuter, we need to work more on that too. So
yeah.
I would take that from Ian as a perspective, because sometimes it's hard for us to say, well, that's where we're there, but people actually don't. So I think that's something we all.
You're going to introduce all these new services, which are great. Each time we've got to market, but not just on social media. There's got to be something else.
And I would think we'd be leaning on just as we start implementing more service to try to promote that, and hopefully this body can, and all the jurisdictions can get it across the finish line. So gonna quickly move ahead because we're getting closer to that 12 o'clock joke time that I think is more real. But stopping pattern, 2030, I already touched on this. And this is essentially kind of how the service would break down by 2030 there, Matthew, the weekday express, northbound and southbound. And then you're essentially looking at 20 to 30 minute headways from peak. But again, going after those new markets, as Ian mentioned, trying to stagger some trips in other parts of the day, doing some additional late night service so folks can actually be entertained in DC and come back to this region. Because we know the market is there. And this is essentially how we move the needle, right? So it's not significant, but it's more than nothing. Looking at the projected increase in ridership, should we adopt this 2030 alternative, and then on the weekends, looking at anywhere between 35 and 4,500 additional riders on every weekday, Saturday and Sunday. So I'm not going to go into this right now because this was really discussed more in concept at the board level, but really understanding through the 2050 vision how we can link into the existing and planned regional transportation connections. And so I made some comments last week at the strategic plan meeting for Fred. If there's other larger regional local transit, initiatives like web study, that kind of thing. We want to be linked into that because it's a network, and it's the last mile really is what make or break the success of the service. And then this is the last slide. This is essentially what, or second to last slide. This is essentially what we're going to be presenting to the board in October. These 4 alternatives. How do you go from what we were calling the modified baseline, that's the 2030 alternatives, to something even more intense by 2050? The board might say, no, we want to really stay at the 2030 level and just kind of keep that bumping along and try to get back to fiscal health, or they want to go all in on regional rail or whatever. It's our job to inform and their job to decide. So finally, the October board, we're going to request to go into phase 3 of the system plan, to release one phase after another to allow for flexibility to change our scope as necessary. I think we are going, if everything goes well in the procurement, we're going to have a series of 10 public pop-ups in phase 3, likely in the November timeframe. We'll probably have 3 in this region. They're gonna be at events, things where we can get a lot of foot traffic, have a table out and just ask people specific questions about VRE, about, about what they would like to see in the next couple of decades. And then we hope to have everything wrapped up, go to the board with a draft in February, and then go to the board for adoption in March. And then it will be adopted, or request for adoption in March, and then the commissions, which actually have to adopt our plan, would do that in April, May. So that was the last slide. If anyone have any questions, I'm really sorry about being the closer here.
Sorry to push you to the end of the program. We won't do that next time.
It should say 2024 in there, right?
Ah, yes, thank you.
Just so you don't.
Yes, we've already passed 2023. Thank you. I'll make that. But yeah, needs to be 2024.
All right, thank you, Nick. If anyone has questions, comments, concerns, email Nick, speak to him. I'm sure he's very interested to hear our
Meeting. If you don't have anything better to do, not stuck on a
All right,
Friday morning.
moving on to item number 8, correspondence.
There is none.
All right, moving on to item number 9, staff reports.
Nothing new from our side that we haven't already covered.
Item number 10, member reports. Anyone, items? Looks like everyone wants to get out of here. All right, moving on to item number 11. Oh. Do I have a motion to it?
Snoozer.
All right, second. All those in favor?
Hi.
Opposed? Adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate all your efforts and your inputs.
Yeah.